And we'll try to get into a little bit more than that in this show, but that is obviously a big storyline. Another big storyline in this week's game is that Rob Gronkowski, Patriots tight end, and Patriots running back Sony Michele, both game-time decisions in this game, and those are two huge pieces on the Patriots offense that we'll get into it later, but could really kind of swing the line a little bit in this game a little bit. But no, it would be a gigantic deal if Rob Gronkowski and or Sony Michele can't play in this game, especially since the Patriots didn't make any roster moves this week at running back or tight end.
I would make the case that both of these quarterbacks can play out of their mind. One can play great, one cannot play great, and that'll matter far less than if those two guys are active or not active. I think that makes so much difference, and there's really history here there with these two quarterbacks. They're better as managers, in my view, and management is not a derogatory term. I look at Aaron Rodgers. He's had some ridiculous weeks this season where he's had over 400-yard games, 2 touchdowns, clean rating, clean QBR, whatever the hell that is, and they still lost. They still just generated 23 points. So I look at the Patriots side of the ball, and it's much the same. Tom can go out and light things up, but if you got to put him back there and throw it 50 times, that's not good for the offense. I think best case scenario for these guys, the numbers can be mild with the quarterbacks. It's relatively unimportant to me if they've got all the in-place elements that make them a better overall unit. So it's not about box score chasing for me with those two guys, although it's fun to watch. I mean, we'll be entertained by them. But Gronk involved, even if it's as, a 3 or 4 target guy, even just a ball or two in the red zone, just a ball or two on in critical third downs, out in the field, could be 4 catches, 40-some yards, maybe 1 touchdown. But that's a big deal because of the distraction that he creates in the formation and because of how well he blocks. I think this is really important, guys, because he got hit up on the podium a few times this week, and I can kind of sense the frustration. He had kind of that blank stare. He knows his stat line doesn't look great. But you go back and watch that game against Lorenzo Alexander. Pretty good Sam linebacker. Good edge guy that can set edges real well. And some of the other guys they had on that team. Gronk is finishing them to the ground sometimes. It's 5 and 6 and 7 yards off the ball. So when you got to stand in front of media people like us and say, "What's wrong?" It's like, "Dude, you watch the games?" It's like, I didn't do the thing that goes in the little Excel spreadsheet, but I played pretty well. And I think that's where they sit. But to completely not have him or to have him in a limited role, that would be a very big deal. That's my spiel on Gronk. I think Sony Michele is a similar situation, although I'm curious to see if he's maybe active, guys. And active with a low rep count. Active as insurance almost as much as anything.
If I had to guess, game time decision means that they won't know until shortly before the game whether he will be active. But I have to think that they expect Sony Michele to play in this game just because they didn't make any moves, any roster moves at the running back position this week. Now, they did go in. Obviously, last week they beat the Bills with Cordell Patterson as their primary running back. But the Bills are the Bills. The Bills, I think they went into that game saying, okay, we can get by with this for now, knowing that Sony Michele will probably be back next week. Because we saw they barely even handed the ball off to James White or Kenyon Barner in that game. I don't think they would want to go into this game with those 3, basically 2.5 running backs on their roster when they had a guy like Kenneth Fowler on their practice squad that they could have promoted if they needed to. They didn't do it, so I would expect Sony Michele to play in this game. Again, like you said on the rep count, I don't know how kind of involved he would be. I don't know if it's going to be the situation like a couple weeks back where he's carrying the ball 25, 26 times. But if I had to guess right now, I think we do see him in this game. And even if both of those players don't play, the Patriots still do have a chance of winning in this game. Obviously, they were without Gronkowski and Sony Michele for most of that Bears game a couple weeks back. But it really does set them back if both of those players are available.
I would put it this way. In the absence of who, we could argue that, and we're not going to know, quite frankly, none of us, because they're going to activate these guys or inactivate them later than this show is going to be on TV. But I think the greater theme is that they have to have a running game. It matters less. What's up, Puppy? It matters less who, but it has to be there. We can't, in my view, get to a situation. We've seen the Patriots in the absence of one and what that does to even the passing game or even some of the play-action elements that you sometimes would have, but when you don't have a running game, it's not there. That's Jacksonville. That's Detroit. That's the games where that portion was basically just not available. And one thing we'll look to today, in my view, is Sony up, Sony not. He'll play. I'm right with Zach that I think he's there in some capacity. But one thing that can move this a step forward where you're not so dependent upon him is if they're going to do those Cordell Patterson packages, which they did a week ago, Cordell Patterson has to be in the game as a pass protector occasionally. He has to be in the game as a guy who's in the backfield, standing at running back, and goes out for a route. And you're probably sitting home and saying, well, what the hell does that matter? What does that mean? it matters for this. When Cordell was in the game last week as a running back, he's 7 yards, 8 yards deep. That's called the home position. He's sitting there at home, and every linebacker on the field, every defensive back is like, go, go.
He's getting the ball.
They're blitzing, they're going, and that's not fair to a back because you don't get a judge of what he's like as a runner. He's exceptional ball in his hands. If everyone across from him has to make an and/or decision as a runner-pass thing.
You saw him get smashed in the backfield a couple times last week,
Well, it's because everyone's blitzing, right? So the way you get rid of that key, the way you erase that off the board, is you have him pass protect once or twice. And he had a week to prepare. And some people say, oh, this is a lift guy. He's a thinner guy, a little taller guy. His body makeup is virtually identical to Latavius Murray at Minnesota. He's a 6'2"-ish, 6'3" guy, weighs 220 or 230. He's very similar. It's something he could do, but you need practice reps to do it. You implement that portion. You're not so dependent, I think, on Sony getting 20. Working a little James, maybe Barner a little bit, working Cordell where it's 10 plays or 12 and they're more real, and all of a sudden you got something.
I do still think that the Patriots' rushing attack would struggle if Sony Michele doesn't play in this game. The good news here is that Sony Michele did return to practice last Saturday.
Yeah.
He was limited all week this week.
Yep.
The reports out there is that there's no structural damage in that knee, easy for me to say, which is a good sign.
MCL is what we told us, right, Doug? MCL?
Well, I don't think it was even that. I don't think there was anything actually wrong.
None
it was
of the
just
CLs.
It got twisted. So I think that it was more of a scary injury really than anything else. It was like when Gronk hurt his knee a couple years ago, got carted off and everything, and then he came back a couple weeks later. I think that's kind of what we're seeing here this week with Sony Michele. I do expect him to be out there. I think they would have done something just because, I mean, Cordero Patterson, like you said, he's got the size, he's got the weight, he's got the speed. He's just not totally used to playing that position, so he is still running a little bit up high. He's not breaking the arm tackles like you kind of need to as a running back. I'm not saying that they're going to lose if Sony Michele doesn't play because they do still have Kenyon Barner and James White, but running the ball definitely would be a struggle. And then at tight end, Rob Gronkowski, I probably put him at about the same percentage of playing. He missed Thursday's practice, the full pads practice, but he was on the field on Wednesday and Friday. He did play last week. Didn't seem like he suffered any big injury in that game, so I would imagine that they're just really managing him. And all of this game time decision stuff, in my mind, it's probably a bit more mind games than anything else, where they have to prepare the Packers for them not to play.
Sort of sneaky side story here before we dive into sort of our script for the rest of the show. I think it's you have two of the biggest branded players that are not quarterbacks that could be butting heads throughout the course of this game if Gronk is up and normal, and that's Clay Matthews. Clay Matthews is the long hair. He's on all the commercials. He's a big name. Obviously, the lineage with that family is tremendous. But Clay has been an edge guy. He's been an off-the-ball guy. You'll see him all over the place. That'll be a fun matchup to watch, quite frankly, because Blake Martinez, really good inside linebacker. We'll talk about him a little bit later. He wanders all over the place. But you're going to see Clay often as a hangover on the edge, opposite Perry at the other side. Sometimes he'll be floating around in the middle over center trying to screw with Brady, maybe shooting a gap, maybe not. Off the ball, as you'd see, like an old Brewski or Hightower in the middle. But the times where he may be matched or maybe roaming against like Gronk, watching Gronk try to set an edge or get an edge or pairing Allen and him together and edging against Clay Matthews. I mean, that's one of your premier matchups in the league as well. They're not the guys that throw the ball.
Definitely. One last note on Rob Gronkowski right before we move on. I think his absence might be kind of diminished a little bit if the Patriots had gotten anything from Jacob Hollister so far this season.
Yeah,
because he's a guy that we're all really high on in the preseason. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's questionable for this game. He's missed, I think, half of the Patriots games so far, if not more. So if the Patriots are getting a little bit in the passing game from him, especially since Dwayne Allen is basically just a blocker at this point, that takes a little bit of pressure off. When both of those guys aren't contributing at all in the passing game, you really need Rob Gronkowski out there.
Yeah, we'll see if Jacob Hollister can play. Two guys have been ruled out so far for the Patriots. That was starting right guard Shaq Mason, interior backup Brian Schwenke for the Patriots Sig Club, James Ferentz off their practice squad. So he'll be that backup there at guard and center. Ted Kerr is expected to start at right guard.
I'm here as the analyst, former player guy. You guys are the reporters, and I'm asking you with everyone at home watching, because this really interests me. I thought when I saw the Ferentz activation, bring him up, he's a center. Now, we know that Ted Karras has in the past popped over and played some backup center. That's been the other times that he's started. He goes in as the full-time starter at right guard. Ferentz is a smaller guy. He's like a true
very
center.
Small.
He's not, I mean, small. He's big, but he's NFL
comparatively
small for
speaking,
But the reason I bring this up, and the reason I'm directing this question to you guys, is the only other guy across that front who has any experience playing guard is actually Marcus Cannon.
No, Cole Croston actually.
Cole's not active.
I would say Cole Croston is probably the next.
I actually don't know if he will be.
But see, that's
tough.
That's my point. So if Cole's not active and you've got Cannon, presumably active, which we don't know. He's another kind of, we think
he didn't play last week.
He didn't play last week, but we think he's back. He's on the head program, as many guys are. But you've got an Andor situation with Waddle and Cannon at right. You possibly have Ferentz up because a backup interior guy. If something bad happens to Karras, the guard might be Marcus Cannon because, or what else you got? Is it
unless you dress 9 offensive linemen,
unless you dress 9, which is scary.
Yeah.
So it's just something at home to pay attention to because we haven't seen Marcus Cannon as a guard in a while.
Right.
But that might be your only alternative here. It'll be something to keep an eye on.
Because James Ferentz is only, when he came out, he was 6'2", 285. He's like a very undersized offensive lineman. I don't think you really want to put him in there.
Cope got it done pretty good, though, at that size.
Absolutely no. For a center, it's totally fine, but as a right guard, that might not be quite as advantageous.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, even injury situations aside, I'm pretty interested to see what we see from Ted Karras in this game because he's a guy who's only started 3 games in his NFL career. 2 of them were at center, but he's looked pretty good every time he's come in. I mean, he's had some spot duty in, I don't know, probably a dozen games or so during his NFL career. Actually played really well in the preseason. The Patriots brought in a lot of veteran offensive linemen looked like kind of Karras might have been on the outside looking in for a roster spot. He beat out all those guys. He's been on the team. He played reasonably well last week when he replaced Mason in Buffalo, and now he's going to be going up against some of probably one of the top defensive tackle duos in the league. Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark's having a fantastic season in there, so I'm really interested to see what I'm going to see from
I would put it up
there.
even a notch from pretty well. I thought he did really well. I went back and watched every snap, and there was the one play that would have jumped out that wasn't good is they didn't pass off a twist very well on one play, and he gave up a pressure that got back there, and that was a little bit ugly. But he had one-on-one pass pro against Kyle Williams, a little older player, but really has been a generational guy. Really good here for Buffalo.
Whoa.
So anyway,
Scott Zolak causing problems.
So anyway, we've got Star Latulele. Am I saying it? Did I get that right? Star
Latulele.
There's a lot of lele's in there. But Star, another really good defensive tackle, matched up again. And then the 2 Phillips. I think Jordan Phillips is the one that was drafted pretty high this year. The point is they have a pretty good 4-man rotation in Buffalo, and Ted caught those particular guys rep after rep after rep. Did really well in the one-on-one pass pro against those guys. The pass pro he lost was when he was uncovered, passing one off. I think his lateral movement's not quite as good as Shaq. That's where you'll notice the difference. But his inline blocking, his go climb. I tweeted out one at Chatham 58 earlier in the week where he was downfield pancaking a little guy. Ted's fun to watch. Ted's a good player. I personally am not too worried about him.
No, and he's a very strong player as well, so I think that definitely helps. And he'll have some help, obviously, from David Andrews at center, from the right tackle, whether that's Marcus Cannon or Adrian Waddle. But Patriots 6-2, the Packers 3-1, and they're both coming off kind of interesting previous games where the Patriots, it was closer than a lot of people imagined against the Bills, and they won, whereas the Packers lost in a game that was pretty close against the Rams. So it is kind of interesting to see these two teams have, different results last week, but almost kind of similar games where the Patriots didn't squeak one out against the Bills, but it was a little bit closer, and the Packers obviously there's no good losses, but it was a decent loss against a team as talented as the Rams.
Yeah, the way I would look at it is there's sort of this weird Bills outlier that everyone has on their schedule this year. If you go look down
look at the Vikings.
look at the Vikings. A lot of people say, well, don't count that Bills game.
Yeah.
Well, and the Packers are actually in that same pocket. They had a 22-0 game that late score that became 22 was late, right? So really both these teams kind of looked how they looked, and I think that's more of a Buffalo thing than where they really are with themselves right now. One of the things that's interesting to me with the Packers is I've just gone back and watched the last 2 games. I don't like to go back too much further than that because you want to know relevant recent information. Their defense played tremendously well in that first half. Only gave up 8 points to the Rams. Rams had 3 and outs, which you haven't seen much of any this year. They were real clean for a half, clean for really most of the third quarter, and then things got away from them. It was a 20-point half there out in L.A. Their defense has had some of the highest highs and lowest lows of any group you would see out there. They gave up 30 points to the Niners and C.J. Beathard the week before that at home, right? So it's hard to figure them out because basically we all stayed at home last week. I mean, I wasn't, it was a Monday night game, so we're sitting there on Sunday afternoon watching them play in that Rams game, and they looked that first half, it was like, wait a minute, what are we watching here? How are the Packers 3-3-1 now? And it's like that's as high as the defense has really played this year. They buttoned up against one of the better offenses in the league, at least for just a half. But then, the recent past, they haven't been very good against bad competition. So you kind of wonder what will show up here this evening. And I think a part of that formula is if you're getting full Patriot. Are you getting the full system? Are you getting all the Gronk? Are you getting all the Michele? Full complement of wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Mike Pettin, the defensive coordinator, handles this game because he blitzed a ton last week against Jared Goff and the Rams, and it was working for him for a while. They were having blitzes where they were sending a safety and a cornerback and just blitzing 6-7 guys in this game, and it was working for a while against Jared Goff, who's a younger quarterback who, while he has been playing very well over the last 2 years, still doesn't have that kind of institutional knowledge that Tom Brady has. You try to do that against the Tom Brady offense, and he's going to pick you apart to Julian Edelman the entire game. So I'm interested to see how they come out and approach this Patriots offense, which didn't look great last week, but they showed on that one drive late in the Bills game that's how dangerous this Patriots offense can be when it's clicking on all cylinders. And even if they don't have a Michele, they don't have a Gronkowski, there's still more than enough weapons in this offense to pick apart really any defense in the league. So I'm really interested to see how the Packers approach this game defensively.
We talked earlier about the injuries that the Patriots have on offense, obviously, with Sony Michele and Rob Gronkowski, but Packers aren't coming into this game at a 100% either. Geronimo Allison has been ruled out of the game. So I guess the question here is who has the better offensive scenario right now, and it really largely depends on Gronkowski and Michele, because if they're healthy, if they're playing, it's definitely the Patriots. But if they're both out, then I don't know, the Patriots offense could struggle at times to move the ball, I think, in this game.
It always kind of just depends to me on what we define as struggle. The Patriots are essentially averaging 30 right now. Their highs are much higher here at home, but I mean the averages get tossed out the window a little bit because we haven't played a ton of games, and you have the Detroit and Jags thing. But the Packers they dropped quite a bit on the road, just 22 points a game on the road, and I
haven't won a road game yet.
Haven't won a road game, exactly. 3-3-1. So I mean, it is a so-called premier matchup. That's in part because the quarterbacks, they're a little. I mean, if you just want to go read Packer media for a week, they're not terribly high on what things are going on right now. I think this is really important to kind of put out there. The Packers have had issues. They haven't stood across from this kind of offense and gone toe-to-toe. It's really been more for the defense bailing things out. We're talking here about a 13th ranked offense in the NFL. If you hyper-focus on Aaron Rodgers, I think you'll be led to believe their offense is doing things they're not. As I mentioned before, in a 23-point game where they lost by 8 points to Detroit, he had 450 yards and 2 touchdowns, and the stat line was brilliant, pristine. But they only put up 23 points. So this is not a top offense in the NFL. This is a middling offense, even with their best scenario. So I'd argue, in the absence of Gronk, I think there's enough here to get 30. Packers haven't been able to show they've gotten 30 out of people, unless it's in a chase scenario, where it's blown out. Like, you get a 14-point lead, 20-point lead, and they're putting up some garbage points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Packers, if anything, maybe are being a little bit overrated in this matchup, just because everyone is talking about Brady versus Rodgers, when these two teams are kind of in different places right now. Let's get into our keys of the game. I'll start out with you, Matt, because I'm probably about to cough again soon. I'm dealing with a bit of an illness here, so excuse me for the coughing. But
That's all right.
Matt, let's just start out with you first.
All right, I'll do sort of machine gun here. We'll go offense, defense. I think offensively, I think they have to be variable. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Keep watching the pregame chat throughout the season. They got to be variable. They're at their best when it's that way. If the Patriots, you see them on a lot of 2nd and 9s. If you see them on a lot of 3rd and 8s, that's not a good situation for them. They've got to get to first. They got to make 2nd down manageable. You got to make 3rd down where it's a wide open cupboard. So really, that doesn't change against this particular group. You brought up the points though about handling Pettin's pressure. I think that's one of the real keys to this game, and that we don't know if Pettin will be willing to go down that path. Why? Well, he's been in this division, right? So I think he knows the lessons you guys spoke of, right? And one of the things you did see from Goff and the Rams a week ago is that they adjusted that pressure. You saw some of the same pressure looks in the 4th quarter that they adjusted to, had an outlet, had a hot read built in, had some extra element. If they're going to go down that road, if the Patriots are picking up pressure, if the Patriots have that variability and run past stuff, I think this is a comfortable win. Now, defensively, it's unfortunate from a Patriots perspective. I think from the Packers perspective, you love that recent film. Your quarterback has had an MCL injury himself, a knee injury himself. He's played through it. He's about 4 weeks removed from that. Some of the guys on tape, Kyle Van Noy, I think, was one that mentioned it. Some of the other rusher guys, maybe it was Dante, had said, hey, We saw him struggling with that on tape 3 weeks ago, then you see it 2 weeks ago, then you see it last week, and all of a sudden it's not bothering him as much. When I say the unfortunate thing for the Patriots is because you have that Trubisky tape in the recent past, and if you're Aaron Rodgers and you're watching that Trubisky tape, it wasn't about circling around the back out of the pocket, except that one goofy one, the 39-yarder. Yep. It was more about back foot, step forward, back foot, step forward. In other words, he's reading the front, reading the low coverage, and just taking off straight up the middle of this thing. And that's what historically Aaron Rodgers has been so good at. Yeah. You cover that portion up, I don't think it's terribly important of a lot of the other statistical measures other than red zone defense. One final point going away on that whole thing, Davante Adams, sexy, big numbers guy, far and away the most important guy offensively on paper for the Packers. Davante Adams had his biggest games this season and games they've lost. So I have a hard time with correlation there. 9 catches, 140 yards, and a touchdown, and they lose by 10. So, it's hard to say, stop Davante Adams. I think it's more pocket control and red zone for me.
I would say, though, that with Geronimo Allison out of this game, I do think there is more importance on Davante Adams, and that's one of the keys that I'm definitely watching is Stephon Gilmore against Davante Adams.
Fun to watch.
Because Stephon Gilmore has been locking down big receivers in recent weeks. Sammy Watkins, Allen Robinson, and Kelvin Benjamin. And obviously Kelvin Benjamin, not on the level of Davante Adams, probably Allen Robinson and Sammy Watkins also quite not to that level, but Stephon Gilmore did a really good job against DeAndre Hopkins in week 1 as well. So if there's anyone in the league equipped to stop a guy like Davante Adams, I think right now it is Stephon Gilmore. And this is a primetime game. Everyone's going to be watching it Sunday night. If Stephon Gilmore can really limit Davante Adams, then I think that a lot of people are going to be talking about Stephon Gilmore as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, which they probably already should be talking about him as being that type of player. Just real quick, my other key, I'll go back to Ted Karras. I think that, he obviously needs to step up against Mike Daniels, against Kenny Clark, because I know that everyone says that the one way to beat Tom Brady is to pressure him up the middle. It's kind of a cliche at this point. But, that is a way that the Patriots can be beat, especially in this game, with Ted Karras in there and such talented defensive front players for the Packers. So I think Ted Karras definitely has to step up, but he also has to have a lot of help there, like I said earlier, with David Andrews and with Marcus Cannon. I do expect Cannon to play in this game.
Yeah, I'll just give out one key to the game. It's the same one I gave out 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever that was, when they hosted the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes here. No big plays. And by big plays, I don't only mean the 55-yard touchdown passes. I mean the 17-yard pass on 3rd and 15, even like the 9-yard pass on 3rd and 7. Aaron Rodgers is so good at converting in those kind of unlikely situations, and it's because that he can not based on his scrambling ability, not his ability to run, even though he does have that, which is a little bit diminished this season with the knee, but his ability to just wiggle around in the pocket, get away from that pass rush. And the Patriots' pass rush this season has been good at pressuring quarterbacks, but not particularly good at actually bringing quarterbacks down. And that's the kind of situation a guy like Aaron Rodgers can thrive in. If he can get away from that first guy, then it's just scramble drill in the secondary. And he's one of the best in the league at looking downfield, identifying that guy, and just delivering an unlikely pass down there. So the Patriots really need to kind of contain Aaron Rodgers, don't let up these big plays, and keep that coverage good downfield.
One theme I wanted to touch on before we bail out of this particular segment, that we do this every week, and Doug has a couple, Zach's got a couple, I got a couple. I think sometimes rather than going, D special teams, we didn't mention teams this week, obviously have the big plays, give them the positive field positions and keep it away from the other side. I think there's a greater theme that kind of goes over the top of all of these, and they hit on it last week, and we spent a lot of time on it last week in our pregame chat talking about this from studio, and it was really having the clean game. And one thing that did happen in Buffalo, even in a sort of meh offensive performance, they didn't turn the ball over, and they forced 2. And it's those situations that you look up and you have a 19-point deficit. That's how. When you play clean, if you'd have played clean against the Chiefs, you'd have beat them by 20 points. Yeah. And that's really the key, I think, for this team going forward. Not just tonight against the Titans, as a head into sort of the later stretch of games. You don't want to give Aaron Rodgers or that okay offense extra opportunities. So keeping the turnovers to 0, really, or at least 1 or less, is so important. And continuing this trend defensively of getting 1 or 2 off of people, put those guys a possession or 2 or 3 behind this offense, no chance.
Patriots do have an interception in every game this season. Yep. This is going to be their toughest challenge yet, to get an interception out of Aaron Rodgers, though, since he's so good in that touchdown to interception ratio.
I believe he's, thrown one this season?
I think it's just one, yeah.
It's very impressive.
Let's get to the Chatham's choice. Well, what are you thinking betting-wise in this one, Matt?
Well, I don't know what we've got right up until the last minute. I believe the line was at 6 last I checked when we went on the air. Basically, you have to consider this sub-score, right? They're sub a full touchdown kind of situation. You'll think back to the Chiefs game, right? That was a barn burner. That's as good an offense, it's as good a team as you had. That's not the Patriots or Rams in the NFL at that time. And it ends up in a 3-point game. The way I look at this, it's a 3-3-1 team on the road that hasn't played well away from home, that scores considerably less points away from Green Bay, that got 6. And that, to me, that's a pretty big knock to the Patriots. I think they're safe anything under a score anytime they do something like that. And because of the uncertainty with points that we talked about, they're a 30-plus with Gronk and Sony. They're maybe a mid or high 20s without them. So it's very difficult. And with the Packers, we just don't know. Aaron Jones is getting his chances running back. Full-time gig now. They trade away
Montgomery.
Yeah, Montgomery. Montgomery's gone. They lose the safety on the other side of the ball. There's enough question marks here to not want to guess on output. So I'm kind of staying away from points. Stick with the line at -6, Patriots all day, every day.
What are you thinking, Zach?
I'm thinking Packers on that. And
Okay.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the Packers won outright in this game. This strikes me as, I don't know, it strikes me as like that Seahawks game a couple years back, remember, during the Super Bowl year where they came into Gillette Stadium. I believe that was a Sunday night as well. Won a close game. I think this will be a close game regardless. I think if the Patriots win this game, it's going to be a 3-4 point game. But I don't know. They have one of these games every year. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the game that the Patriots lose here.
I'll split the difference here. I'm going with Matt. I don't think the Packers are that good. I know that I'm kind of dulling the expectations of this game by saying that, but I just don't think they're quite as good as all of the hype is built up. And, I mean, this is a caveat on this, but if Sony Michele and Rob Gronkowski play, then I think that the Patriots definitely win by 6 or more in this one. But if they don't, I still think they can squeak it out. I just don't think the Packers are that high-powered on either side of the ball. Any final thoughts here, guys, before we move on?
Well, one thing I want everyone at home to kind of keep an eye on, and, we've done I haven't. I was so obnoxious with the whole Brady-Rodgers thing. I'm glad that by and large we stayed away from that. You're not going to learn who the best guy is ever. Tom's resume is in his pocket 5 years ago. So one of the things, though, that I think you'll get tonight a chance to watch is contrast in styles, and that matters. Greg Maddux is in the Hall of Fame. He didn't have to be Randy Johnson, right? There are other ways to sort of to peel the orange. And one of the things that you will watch tonight that I think is interesting contrast to these guys, and I think it's why you can't just forget about Peyton Manning, those whole GOAT conversations. It isn't just reduced to this guy because he's the last standing relative to Tom. One of the things that Tom Brady does so incredibly well that Peyton himself also was really good at is not take sacks. He takes incompletions. You know what incompletions do? They make your rating go down. They make your stats look worse. They make your completion percentage worse. You know what Aaron Rodgers does? He takes more sacks. And he's in the losses they've had this year, he's been sacked 4 times. 4, and then the tie was a 3, I believe it. But Tom, at no game this season, has been sacked more than twice. And it's easy to say, offensive line and compare them, but usually the taking of the sack or not taking the sack is the decision of whether or not to chuck it in the stands. How quickly do you read that I'm in trouble and this one's one I need to bail away? I think that's the biggest contrast. Both of these guys, Aaron's going to make some more crazy throws, arm angle and a little outside the pocket, and he's tremendous. It's not to denigrate the guy. He's fun. He's entertaining as hell. But I think the real difference is one is just a slightly better game manager, and that's the gig. It's a management gig. So enjoy it. Enjoy watching these two guys, but irrespective of what happens tonight, I was joking around about this on Twitter. Brady can throw 100 touchdowns. Brady can throw 100 interceptions. Neither of those things will change what happens. This is 3.5 hours in November of 2018. That's all it is. Be entertained by it, but this ain't going to change the water cooler conversation.
I agree. Just enjoy it. I mean, this is only the second time in when Aaron Rodgers came into the league in 2005, so that's 13 years. This is only the second time these guys have squared off as starters in a regular season game. They're two of the best quarterbacks. No matter who you think is the best of all time or the best right now, I am with you that I think Brady has the edge in both of those categories, but this is fun. These guys are two of the best NFL quarterbacks that we have ever seen. Sit back and enjoy it. Don't worry about all the debates and everything. Just watch some football.
It's also kind of a cool helmet. Down here on the field, these guys get out here working out.
Good colors.
There are certain.
Historic, man. I love it.
Zoe was dropping in on us there earlier. We kind of joke about this each week when teams come in, and you notice this as a player. You notice, oh damn, that Raiders helmet just shines. You know what I mean? There are some traditional, just the look.
Iconic.
It's like iconic. It's like, ooh, that's that Packers helmet. It just looks good.
That wants to get out there.
I do. I love it. The Raiders one looks good when and you hate the Cowboys and all that, but the star, it shines. It looks a little. You see the Jaguars one out there and you want a puke bucket. I mean, that is not what it's for. This is one of those games. You get the icon. You get a great fan base. Handful of them here actually circling the bottom area. Not fans of that, but it's going to be a fun atmosphere and just enjoy the game.
Going back to Brady and Rodgers just really quick, I think it's been such a forced debate about Rodgers being the GOAT. I mean, I think that Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. He's been compared against Peyton Manning, Joe Montana, John Elway, all these guys through the years. I think you have to be a Packers fan to believe that Aaron Rodgers is the greatest quarterback of all time at this point in his career. Yeah. Sure, maybe he has a chance,
a decade from now.
Yeah, a decade from now. But at this point, it is Tom Brady, and I think it's been a silly debate all week. But I think that will wrap it up here for the pregame chat. Stay tuned keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. Follow Zach on Twitter at Zack Cox NESN. Follow Matt on Twitter at Chatham58. Like I said, keep it locked on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage.
See you, folks.